BBMs and to all of this other stuff that we are on, all of these things that clog and cloud our vision, the reality is there is no real safety net. There's no real security for young people while interacting on these sites. I sat at my laptop while reading this article some time ago, saddened and puzzled, as I could not believe nor even understand for the life of me why so many young people do exactly what Ashley Hall did, and that being befriending people and persons on these sites that they really do not know. Now, I know I'm different because I'm a preacher, so I kind of got to be nice and add everybody when they send me a friend request. I don't ever want people to think that I'm antisocial and don't want to reach, because you never know how you can impact somebody's life. And I've had people send me messages on Facebook looking for encouragement in times of distress and need, but I've also had people send me messages on Facebook that have been out of order. I've had men send me messages on Facebook that almost made me remind them of my manhood. Don't send me no message and you trying to play like I'm some punk. No, that's not the reality. Let's do things right. Let's do it in decency, and let's do it in order. But sometimes we've got to be cautious, dear friends, on these sites, because we really don't know the persons behind the scenes. Sometimes they may have pictures up that portray them to be one thing, but the reality is that they can be something totally different. But I was enlightened by this one simple response that harbors one simple yet powerful word in which the author used while posing a question, and that response was, they are trusting. That's what she says. She says, they are trusting. And I submit to you today that there is a word of encouragement for us. And the word is that though there are those out there that seek to prey on innocent victims because of the sickness of their minds, there is one, capital O-N-E, who remains trustworthy and faithful even in the midst of the situations and circumstances in life that seem to block and distort our view of who he really is. And so I thought, dear friends, that it would be befitting of us to journey to this most familiar passage of Scripture that has been rehearsed in our minds from many previous encounters with it. Dear friends, I need to tell you, it is important as we set up this pericope and as we set up this text for you today, it's important to note that this awesome book deals specifically with the theme of wisdom. It was written, dear friends, by King Solomon, who of course was the son of King David and Bathsheba. My brothers and sisters, I think I ought to tell you, it's interesting, though, to consider and to witness the grace and the mercy of God in the midst of the situation, because of the despicable and the dastardly deed that King David had done in order to have Bathsheba. Because you do know the story, or if you don't know the story, let me drop it in your lap for a moment. The story is of him putting Uriah out on the front lines, Uriah being the husband of Bathsheba and being his top general, his top man in his army, in order that Uriah might die and that David then might be able to take Uriah's wife. But in spite of all of that, look at how God flips the script, because God was still gracious and God was still merciful to him, even though the first child that Bathsheba was pregnant with died at birth. God still saw fit to send them this child, who had been coined the wisest man that ever lived. He was known for his wisdom. He was known for his riches. He was known for his writings. He was so wise that people from surrounding nations came to hear his wisdom. He composed 3,000 proverbs, 1,005 songs. He also wrote the Song of Songs, better known as the Song of Solomon, and the book of Ecclesiastes. And you need to know that in all of those books, nothing but wisdom permeates throughout. But can I drop something else on you? Because watch this. God will still show grace to those and mercy to those that belong to him, even when we mess up. Because sometimes the best deal for you to do is when you mess up, you ought to fess up. Because if you read Psalm 51, David confesses his sin to the Lord. He says in essence that he's naughty by nature in verse number 5. He says, because I was born in sin, I was shapen in iniquity. In sin did my mother conceive me. And brothers and sisters, you need to realize that all of us are messed up from the neck up. All of us are tore up from the floor up. But thank God that God still shows grace and mercy to us in spite of our sin. And I think somebody ought to put a praise on it right there, that God has still shown grace and mercy to you when you know you really didn't even deserve it. Can I drop this on you? That's really what God's grace is. God's grace is God's unmerited favor. We did nothing to earn it. I feel like preaching here today. We did nothing to deserve it. We couldn't have paid for grace, but Jesus paid for grace. And you ought to be thankful, because grace is really the acronym for God's riches at Christ's expense. Because Jesus died on the cross, I now have God's grace. And I can give God praise, and the old folk would shout off of grace, because as David said, I got goodness and I got mercy, and they're following me all the days of my life. And anybody in here over the age of 65, you know it was nothing but God's grace and nothing but God's mercy that kept you safe. I got to get back to the text. So he opens this book with the theme of wisdom, which is the Hebrew word chokmah. And it means skill and can refer to ability in craftsmanship, ability in trade, ability in war. But the most common use of this word is in reference to wisdom in everyday living. It is therefore not just the idea of intelligence, but it is also the idea of moral integrity. I think I need to put a pin right there and say something. Because this generation, though we seem to have intelligence, we also seem to be lacking moral integrity. We seem to want the best of both worlds. The reality is, dear friends, you can't have the best of both worlds. Either you're going to serve God or you're going to serve of Satan. Either way, you're going to serve somebody or you're going to serve the other. You cannot serve God and serve Satan at the same time. The choice is yours. Choose you this day whom you will serve. And for many of us, we want to have everything that the world has while still holding on to God at the same time. But the reality is, you can't have what the world has and then hold on to God at the same time, because the two are a paradox to each other. The two are a juxtaposition against each other. The two are against each other, because the reality is, it's God versus the world. And you need to understand that Satan is the God of this world. And for many of us, we're chasing after paper. We're chasing after all this other stuff that means nothing. I know the old folk would put it this way: you will never see a Brinks truck behind a hearse. You ain't gonna see it. Because when you leave here, you can't take nothing with you. Joel put it this way: naked I came here, and naked I'm gonna leave up out of here. The Lord gives and the Lord taketh away. But watch this. He says, blessed be the name of the Lord. While you trying to get all you can all you get, and then sit on the can, what you ought to do is, you ought to be a blessing to somebody else that doesn't have what you have. Because you are not blessed for yourself, but you're blessed to bless somebody else. One thing I'm not understanding nowadays is selfish and stingy church folk who think that God has blessed them so that they can have everything to themselves. No, God blessed you so you can bless somebody else. If God healed you, you ought to tell somebody. If God delivered you, you ought to tell somebody. If God saved you, I gotta get back to the... Let me get to the text. He moves. He says something powerful. He says, trust. I don't have time to really walk through it like I want to, because I done spent all my time shouting myself already. But he says trust. That word trust is the Hebrew word batak, and it means to attach oneself. It means to confide in. It means to feel safe. It means to be confident, secure, and careless. It means to rely on, and I love this one, it means to put your weight on. Yeah. Now, dear friends, there are so many people, there are so many things that all of us try to trust in, and what we find out is they ain't trustworthy. All of us have been let down by the people we thought wouldn't let us down. Am I right about it? All of us have been surprised by folk that we thought was 100% in our corner, and then we found out, no, they ain't really in our corner. But let me also drop something on you. Sometimes it's not that people don't want to help you. Sometimes it's just that people really can't help you. And so you got to learn to stop getting mad at folk when folk really can't help you. Everybody, listen, everybody is struggling. Everybody is going through. Everybody needs something every now and then, and sometimes folks just don't really have it. And the only thing that some folk can do is, I'm going to pray for you. But you know, you got to be cautious of that too nowadays, because when people say, I'm going to pray for you, sometimes you got to be cautious, number one, of what that prayer is. You better make sure that they are Praying for you, and they are not Preying for you. Because some people are not praying for you, they're praying on you. They want to see you fall. They want to see you go down. They want to see your demise because they realize where God is taking you to. But I heard the Bible, Paul put it this way: if God be for us, who in the world can be against us? And brothers and sisters, you ought to be thankful that if you're on the Lord's side, much like the Allstate commercial, you're in good hands. You don't have to worry because God's got you covered. So, it says put your weight on. Stop trusting in people that can't really help you. It says put your weight on. He says rely on, trust in the Lord, because the reality is God is the only one that can change your situation. He's the only one that can change your circumstance. And the good news is that even when you can't trace God, because sometimes God is untraceable. Sometimes we can't locate God. And I'm not saying, don't misinterpret my theology, because I do not subscribe to theology that says that we should find God. All right. The religions of the world are about man finding God through his own efforts and abilities. But the reality of salvation is, salvation